Hello, girls, gays, theys, and babes. Pride Month might be half a year away, but that is not going to stop me today from assigning a plant to each color of the Pride flag. Because why not celebrate Pride year-round? Pride means something different to everybody. For me particularly, I came out of the closet and have been openly gay since 2009. I was in middle school at the time. You can imagine not a very easy time for someone to come out, although I personally am very grateful that it was the late 2000s and not years prior when things were even more difficult, and I personally can't even fathom what that would have been like. Of course, everyone's experiences are valid no matter what they experienced, and I kind of shunned gay culture throughout my high school experience and a couple years beyond that, just out of fear of being known as like the gay kid in my community, by my peers, by my family. And it took me a long time to really learn who I am as an individual and to love myself, and that's why Pride is so extremely important to me. So before we get started, I would just love to say that I would love to hear in the comments why Pride is important to you, whether you are a member of the LGBTQ plus community or you are just an ally. Pride should be important to everybody, and I would love to hear why. So as I mentioned, today we are going to assign a plant to every color of the Pride flag. Got over 10 plants to talk about today, so it's quite the feat. So let's not waste any time. The first plant we're going to talk about today is going to represent red and the Pride flag, which symbolizes life. And that's going to be the Aglaonema red emerald. I talk about this plant a lot. I'm a really big fan of it. It's one of my favorite Chinese evergreens, which is the common name for Aglaonemas. And it's kind of funny that they have that name, Chinese evergreen, because a lot of Chinese evergreens are going to sport colors other than green. Although there is plenty of green on this plant, the thing you're going to notice first is absolutely the red color. This is a very easy plant to grow. This is one that is going to be recommended for like medium to low light spaces, does not require any direct sunlight by any means, although I would still recommend growing this plant in a brightly lit room. I think the issue most people are going to run into when bringing Chinese evergreens home, regardless if they are colorful or all green, is going to be putting them in too low light of an area because they're often going to be sold in the low light selection at your houseplant stores. Putting them in too dark of a corner, they're going to start to lose leaves rapidly and not look like the plant they used to be. So I would recommend bringing home your Aglaonema, putting it in a well-lit spot for a couple of weeks, let it put off a nice leaf or two before you go ahead and then push it even further into your home and maybe those darker corners where it's going to look a little bit more ornamental and serve its purpose aesthetically. These are absolutely plants that you can push pretty deep into your home. You're just going to have some patience getting them acclimated before you do so. A very low maintenance houseplant, along with the lighting, it's very easy going with the watering. I'm giving it a small drink roughly once a week. You could even push that to giving it a nice drink like every 2 weeks. Definitely a couple times a month you'll be watering it. I think the worst thing you can do is just water this plant a little bit too much. Most plants that are going to serve you these bright shades of red are going to require a lot of sunlight, so this is a really excellent option if you're looking for a bright pop of color but just don't have that much sunlight. Moving on to orange, which represents healing, we're going to spotlight my Philodendron Billietiae today. This sports some orange petioles, so the part of the stem that connects the leaf to the main stem where the leaves are going to grow out of. These were a little bit more pronounced orange in the greenhouse, but I still think they are getting the job done today, and this perfectly is going to represent orange on the Pride flag today. I've only had this one since late summer, early fall, so it hasn't been in my possession the longest amount of time, but I've still gotten a couple of nice new leaves on this, which is very promising because this is not the cheapest houseplant. This has been a very popular philodendron at the forefront of the aroid craze that's been going on for the last couple of years. So not the easiest plant to get your hands on, although it's been, becoming much more prevalent on the market and its price has gone down in comparison in the last couple of years. I'm basically just trying to say that if you do get your hands on it, it's totally worth it. It has a really nice presence in my home. It's been living above my kitchen cabinets near my skylight, and it seems to be really enjoying it, although we are in the winter months, so I'm not expecting any new leaves for the next couple of months, but what I have on the plant now and what has grown in since I got it has been really impressive. In fact, it's grown so well that I feel like I'm having a really hard time getting it on camera. I can't really see what's going on. It's been very easy to grow, honestly, one of the easier philodendrons that I've had in my home, especially for the ones that I would classify as like high ticket items. This one has shown no signs of stress. All the leaves look fantastic. All the new growth has come in fantastically. This is, I believe, the newest leaf right here, the last one that's grown in for me since the late fall, I think. I think it put off one new leaf since I moved into this apartment. And I'm just really happy with the growth overall. Like I said, I haven't had it that long, so I don't have a bunch of tips to share with you, just more my joy for this plant. And orange plants are few and far between. The only one that I can think of otherwise is the Chlorophytum flashfire, the spider plant relative. So you're not gonna get a lot of orange shoes with plants in the home. So I really appreciate this one for standing out, because as queer people, we stand out for the right reasons, and this one stands out for the right reasons as well. For yellow, which symbolizes sunlight and therefore new ideas, we're gonna spotlight Philodendron Lemon Lime. This is a trailing philodendron. It really just keeps on growing and growing. Mine is at least 5 feet long. I've had this one for a couple of years. It's been a very easy growing philodendron, just as easy to grow as its plain green counterpart, which is probably the slightly more prevalent version of this plant. I believe it's Philodendron hederaceum that you're going to find on the market, but if you are lucky enough to find the lemon lime variety, I would highly recommend giving it a go. It's going to add a really nice pop of color to your home, as will many of these plants that I'm talking about today. However, like I said with the Aglaonema, it's kind of difficult sometimes to find plants that are going to give you a bunch of color, a really bright pop of color that don't require a lot of sunlight. A lot of succulents, for example, are going to offer you blues and reds and purple colors. However, if they are not subject to bright south-facing windows in the northern hemisphere, north-facing windows if you're in the southern hemisphere, those are not going to hold onto their color. They are going to turn green, they're going to get gross and leggy and just not look good. And while philodendrons do require a titch more sunlight than Aglaonemas do, in my own experience, they are still going to offer you a lot of color across the board for really not a lot of sunlight. Also, plants like this you can buy in a small 4-inch pot, just starting to creep over the edge, and within a year you will have a nice long plant similar to this. Like I said, I've had this one for a couple of years, but still they grow very, very fast, or often you can already find them trailed out, ready to go, ready to place up on a nice shelf and just be the star of the show. Picking a green plant, which represents prosperity by the way, was probably the most difficult one to pick. Most of these other colors, I only had like 1 or 2 plants in my home that offered the color to pick from, but a lot of my plants are green. But I ended up deciding to talk about this lovely, if I can get it without damaging it, very architectural plant, this Xerosychius dangai. It's got a lot of character. I have it growing on the bamboo hoop, and boy is it dusty. Gotta give it a good dusting when I remember, or a good rinse in the shower, but it just gives you so much character, and it's so unique. And you know who offers you a lot of character and is very unique? The LGBTQ plus community. So I thought this is very fitting. This is another one I've had for a couple of years. It's a very slow growing plant. When I first got it, it was very difficult to find. My friends had found it on one of their plant excursions, and it was like 2 pieces that were like no bigger than what my finger is chopping off right now, coming out of the base of the soil. And over time, it has really grown into quite the specimen. I'm really happy with this. It's really starting to pop off right now. This must be a summer dormant plant or a winter grower, because I see so much new growth. New stem here, a new stem here, there's a new little one coming up right here, and I'm sure there's a couple more that are hiding from me that I can't find at the moment. So absolutely a plant that follows that adage that I always share: the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap, and girl, she's leaping. But I really just love how this is, in essence, just such a plain plant. It's really just plain green, succulent circles of a leaf on a stem, just growing in a very uniform manner, but over time, the way it grows, it gets more character and it gets more unique. And basically, like I said at the beginning of this, that I feel like just represents me as a member of the queer community to the T. And just like this plant, I will only continue to develop character and uniqueness like a fine wine. But this is a really easy plant to grow. Regardless of it being a slow grower, it's been very reliable. I keep it in a windowsill. I've always grown it in a windowsill, never anywhere but. I'd classify it as one of those set and forget plants where you really don't need to pay much attention to it. It's going to grow no matter what. If you remember to water it, if you forget to water it, this thing is going to survive just as long as you are giving it the sunlight that it requires. My love for this plant has grown more over the years as it really just comes into its own, and I'm really looking forward to how it's going to look in a couple of years. I'll have to expand the bamboo hoop, add another one, going this other way, just like I have with my Hoya australis here, which we're not going to be talking about today, but it's right here, so I might as well to show you the full 3D effect of rather than just having one hoop. It really gives a lot to behold. Is that a phrase? I don't know. You know what I mean? It's killer. We love it. It slays. For blue, which stands for tranquility, serenity, and peace, we're going to talk about Scindapsus pictus today. This one in particular is the Exotica variety. This is yet again another one that has been with me for years. This was actually the first plant that I ever bought myself when I got my job at the plant store. It was like a little gift to myself. Also super dusty. She lives, oh my God, holy crap. Do you see that? Hopefully not. She lives up on the wall, up in my home, up above my kitchen, so she hasn't come down once since I moved in, and now I'm realizing I think I'm gonna have to pull everything down and throw it in the shower because she's dusty, girl. But just because she's dusty doesn't mean she still isn't a star. I absolutely love these leaves. Scindapsus across the board are going to give you some really nice blue hues to your home. Once again, like I was saying, with like the blues, reds, and the purples, most often those are going to require a lot of sunlight when you find those to hold up those colors, but the Scindapsus is one of those blue plants that is kind of an outlier in that situation and is a lower light houseplant that is going to thrive in the middle areas of your home to even the lower light areas of your home. Although I would recommend with these larger leaf Scindapsus, just like with the Aglaonemas, maybe keep them a little bit closer to the window when you're first acclimating them to your space. But once it's been some time and they've grown some nice leaves, go ahead and push it a little bit further into your home. They can definitely handle it. My favorite thing about Scindapsus plants is they are very vocal, especially keeping this one up on the wall or in the past when I've had it up on the shelf or even hanging up. When this plant needs water, the leaves curl backwards. It's very, very vocal. Also, I'm so sorry about the construction. I don't know if you can hear or not, but they're sawing and hammering and doing every single thing they possibly can to build this building that they are building. I completely respect that. I'm doing my job as well. They're doing their job. If you're just becoming familiar with watering plants or how often to water plants, this is a great one to learn from. I still, to this day, wait for this plant to curl up its leaves, and I know the first day it curls up its leaves, it's time to water. It's best to not wait much longer after that because the plant's already dry and telling you it's dry. So at that point, you might start to lose some leaves. They'll turn yellow and brown and fall off, and that's when you're gonna start to get a bare plant at the base, like inside your planter, which is going to, over time, make your plant look leggy and sparse and just not great, which you can cut the plant back and they'll regrow, or you can cut cuttings off of the plant, the ends of the vines, reroot them up and put them back in the base of the planter. There is ways to remedy that situation, but the easiest way to remedy that situation is to just prevent it by watering your plant consistently. I should mention that I find the smaller leaf Scindapsus to be a little bit easier to grow than the larger leaf Scindapsus. They are much more willing to put off leaves. I have had with my large leaf Scindapsus for the past year or so, it's been putting off these leafless vines. However, that could very well be from the fact that this has been living in the same pot and soil since I purchased the plant a couple years ago. We have some new growth coming off here. Whether it's going to make a leaf or not, I will find out in the future. It's dragging on the floor by now, so it doesn't really matter. But the first thing I could do to really give this plant the attention that it deserves is to give it a nice bigger planter and some nice fresh soil. I just really love the way it looks in this planter, okay? I'm not willing to give it up yet. For purple, which stands for spirit, we're gonna touch on my, oh God, in my face, my Philodendron Atabapoense. Very similar to the Philodendron Billietiae. This is going to give you some more subtle color. So while the front of this plant is not gonna give you purple whatsoever, or violet, is it purple or violet? I think violet's more classic. It's going to give you that nice purple shade on the back side of the leaf, which is not something you're going to find that often with philodendrons, although they're completely out there. This is something you're going to most see often with calatheas at your local houseplant stores, maybe a couple of peperomias and some hemigraphis, mostly terrarium plants. So it's not often you're going to find these nice large-leaved, robust plants that are going to be giving you this nice purple shade on the back, which is really one of my favorite characteristics that a plant can have. It's so exciting when you get served one thing on the front side of the leaf and you spin it to the back and it's something completely different. It's like a reveal. So I'm completely obsessed. Just like the Philodendron Billietiae, even though this is kind of a high-ticket item when it comes to philodendrons, not so much as the Billietiae. This is still going to be very easy to grow, and I can promise you, if you are going to go out of your way to bring it into your home, you're going to have a good time growing it. Just like with most philodendrons, this is going to thrive in the brightly indirect lit areas of your home, so like an east-facing window, a west-facing window pulled a little bit away from the window, pulled away from a south-facing window if that's the full sun of the northern hemisphere, pulled away from a north-facing window if you're in the southern hemisphere, or maybe in that north-facing window if you are in the northern hemisphere, and vice versa. The thing that's going to set most of these philodendrons apart that I'm talking about today is their growth patterns. The philodendron lemon lime can also climb up a moss pole just like this, but it's going to trail much more easily. Those vines are much skinnier than you're going to find with these, and they're going to want to trail freely in the home. That's kind of the way that it's hybridized, for lack of a better term, to grow in the home, versus this kind of plant, more of a collector plant, is going to want to grow the way it's growing in nature, which it's climbing up with these slightly thicker vines. And then you might have noticed with the philodendron billietiae, it had much more of a trunk-like stem, which I believe over time it will still grow to be very similar to this. It's just going to take a lot more time. So for right now, that's going to be growing much more like a self-heading philodendron, like a philodendron rojo Congo, or like the Thamatophyllum sprucianum, if you're familiar. So for now, that's going to hold a structure similar to that, but over time, I think it might be looking a lot more like this philodendron Nottopoense here. It's just going to take a lot of time. Next up is brown, which represents queer people of color, and brown plants are like the coolest plants out there because I feel like they're brown because they're supposed to look like dead plants to like ward off predators. So this is a Euphorbia platyclada, a very dead stick looking plant. I think that might even be like the name of it. So it's very closely related to any other Euphorbia you can possibly think of. The crown of thorns, does it have a name? The Euphorbia trigona, the like cactus looking Euphorbia that like every houseplant store has in their cactus section, like 5 feet high, but it's not technically a cactus. Lots of Euphorbia out there. There's so many cool ones. Lots of Euphorbia out there. So many are extremely unique, and this one is going to fit that bill perfectly. It doesn't even really look like a plant. It kind of looks like something that you would find like in a fish tank that's just like a plastic item growing or living in the bottom of an aquarium. I don't know, it kind of gives me that vibe. Something you'd find like in a coral reef, or also just dead in a desert. Like it gives completely both of those, completely polar opposites, but it's giving both of those, at least in my opinion. This is a recent acquisition. I've only had this one for a couple of months. I got it from my friends at Plant Haven Toronto, and it's been such a joy to grow this. It's only grown a few new appendages since I got it. I can imagine with this being like a dead stick looking plant that it's not the most robust grower, but I believe once I have it for a couple more years, it's really going to fill out and look like much more of a mess of dead sticks, which is just like so joyous. Something that's supposed to look dead, but it grows. Like, isn't that just like the most fabulous thing ever? I've been keeping it in a window because I do feel like this brown color is brought on by sunlight, very similar to like I was saying earlier about the reds, the blues, and the purples that you're often going to see in succulents. I do feel like if you were to put this away from the window, it would probably fade back to more of a green color, as I feel like the sunlight is kind of, in a way, like burning the foliage. Not burning it, but you know, you get what I'm saying. It's giving it the color, like how we suntan. You completely get it. I think that's the same exact effect going on here with this fancy Euphorbia. I think I should be getting more into these dead stick plants because as my other plants die, they kind of look, you know, like decrepit and terrible. But if I was to accidentally kill this, or if it was on the downswing, I don't even think you'd really be able to notice. So I think more of a reason to add a couple more of these types of plants to my home. But this fun brown flat-leaved Euphorbia platyclada is so interesting. It really does look dead. I love it. For black, which also represents queer people of color, of course, I have to talk about the ZZ Raven today. I almost feel like it would be sacrilegious if I talk about any other black plant that's not the ZZ Raven. This is what everyone's mind would go to immediately when they think of a black plant. This is giving witchy, it's giving gothic, it's giving everything you need and more. And fortunately, this is extremely easy to get your hands on now. Just a couple of years ago, a plant in a 6-inch pot would have cost you like $200, while nowadays you can walk into your local big box store and it is readily available for a mere $15 to $20. So just goes to show how the plant market works. A really excellent example, really something to learn from here. But it's really interesting how the new leaves come in this bright green color, almost a little bit brighter green than the standard ZZ plant, and then will fade back to black over time. Of course, a very slow growing plant, even more slow growing than the standard ZZ plant, which is already one of the slowest growing plants that I grow in my possession. So patience is required with this one. Also, I find that the black Raven ZZs are much more susceptible to root rot than the standard green ones. That's why I only have a couple pieces of this left at this point. It was a rescue mission a couple years ago. I'm fortunate that I saved this. Also makes it better that this would be much easier to replace nowadays than it was back then. I would just suggest making sure that you give your ZZ Raven a really nice porous mixture versus you could probably get away with standard soil right from the bag for a regular ZZ plant if you're using a nice porous planter. This is going to require some extra perlite, pumice, orchid bark, something to keep that soil from sitting too wet. And I would highly recommend not giving it a glazed ceramic planter unless you feel guaranteed you're going to get some good drainage and airflow in there. I would recommend putting it in a terracotta planter, at least to start. I can imagine myself, now that I've had this sitting in this small terracotta pot for a couple of years now, I could probably move it to a similar sized glazed ceramic planter that's going to be much more aesthetically pleasing for the houseplant, and I won't have issues, but I would be a little bit more concerned if I was to freshly pot this right from the greenhouse in my home. Then you might start to have some issues. At least I did in my own experience. But as long as you give these a well-aerated soil, don't water them too often, and give them just a little bit more sunlight than you would give your standard green ZZ plant, I think you will have smooth sailing with these ZZ Ravens, and they're absolutely perfect if you are somebody who has a very modern aesthetic to your home. The very architectural, upright, and then just the plain blackness of this plant is going to fit any modern home like a glove, so highly recommend it there. Damn, I really can't get a break today. Construction next door, and now they are doing something on my roof. Hopefully I don't think you can hear it, but I can hear it. Anyway, for baby blue, which is going to symbolize the trans community, particularly the boys in the trans community, I wanted to spotlight the Cebu Blue Pothos. It's so hard to say. Epipremnum pinnatum Cebu Blue. This is the baby blue cousin of the standard golden pothos, one of the most common houseplants on the market and one of the easiest houseplants to grow, and a plant that I recommend everyone have in their possession because it's really going to do a number on your space aesthetically. This Cebu Blue Pothos, although I think everyone should have it just like the golden pothos, I do think it fits more like bohemian styled homes a little bit better. It's a little bit more relaxed in the way that it hangs, and the blue color and the thinner leaves are going to, you know, fit a more like wood and metal vibe versus a more like modern aesthetic. If you catch my drift, also that might just be personal opinion, but you know, just my 2 cents there. I'm a sucker for trailing houseplants. I love just like a little pot of a plant like this with just like a bunch of vines spilling out, just like you saw with my lemon lime philodendron. There's just something about plants just spilling off one edge of the planter. It's like I'm pouring it out, like I'm pouring some creamer into a cup of coffee or something. I don't know, I just love it. This used to be very difficult to get your hands on. Like, this was nowhere to be found when I first got into gardening. Started to work its way onto the market a couple years after, and now it's in full force, very easy to find. You can probably find a full hanging basket of this ready to go for minimal prices at your local houseplant store. What is going on, sirs? Hello? They can't hear me, it's fine. Anyway, very similar to the Scindapsus, this is going to be very vocal with you when it needs to be watered, so a great plant to have hanging up, also a great plant to learn when it's time to water. It will droop a little bit more dramatically than the Scindapsus. I guess the Scindapsus is pretty dramatic, but this is going to, like, you're going to be worried that this is, like, dying if you get to the point. But you'll go ahead and water it, it'll perk back up and look good as new. The only thing, like I mentioned with the Scindapsus, if you go like a day or two too long, or a couple days too long, even worse, you will start to lose some leaves on these plants. And you can see with this one right here, I've probably been a little too lackadaisical because there are no leaves inside the base of this planter where there once was. They're all spilling off the side of the planter here, which in this case with this tiny little planter, it's okay because I can hide larger plants around it and this can just be spilling out in front. But if this was just a standalone plant, it wouldn't be bringing it home, if you know what I mean. I have a couple of these. This is just one of my smaller ones that I have, but a nice large hanging basket of this is just like the golden pothos, really going to have such a wonderful effect on your home, specifically if you have a nice boho style, like me. So for pink, which represents once again the trans community, specifically the girls in the trans community, we're gonna talk about this lovely Tradescantia zebrina. Is it multicolor? I think it's multicolor. Multicolor. So this is very closely related to the standard Tradescantia zebrina, I'm realizing now that this macrame hanger is probably causing more problems than not. I should have just taken it out, but you know what? We're already here, we're already talking, we're already filming. Anyway, some really nice bright pink color, a really fun trailing houseplant. It's very closely related to, like I was saying, the standard inch plant or Tradescantia zebrina. Got off topic there. But it's going to give you some nice baby pink hues to it, as well as some variegation, and in the light, the pink is going to shine right through that white, so a really great plant to hang in your window, especially if it's a brightly lit window. I have mine hanging in my east-facing window. I think this would thrive in a west-facing window as well. South-facing might scorch it, north-facing might not be enough. You can try that out yourself. I find that Tradescantia are very, very easy plants to grow, just like over a couple of years. They're not the most maintainable plants. And kind of what I mean by that is they're gonna grow exponentially. Like this is going to be a full waterfall of inch plant over the next couple of years. But then beyond that point, regardless of how up to date, it's not the word I'm looking for, no matter how much I upkeep my Tradescantia, I'm going to start to lose some of this foliage out of the base of this plant as it continues to grow and put all of its energy down here. It's not like my peperomias where they're continuously putting off new growth from the base, at least in my experience. So then I find myself having all this foliage down here and a bunch of leggy stems, leafless stems going on up here. Fortunately, we are at the beginning of this plant's life cycle. I've only had this one for probably 4 to 6 months at the moment, so we are still just getting going. We still have a full head of hair up in the main planter. It's just going to be a matter of time, I feel like, before we start to lose that as this plant starts to fill out. So a plant that you're going to get your money's worth. This is a very inexpensive plant. It's like $10. A full hanging basket probably wouldn't cost you more than $20. If you get a couple years out of it, I think it's money's worth. It's just not going to be, in my experience, like a tree that you bring home that's going to grow up to your ceiling over the next 20 years. I've never held on to a Tradescantia more than a couple of years myself. I think the most important thing with these is to keep them moist, especially since they do require a little bit more sunlight. In that window, they're going to be drying out a little bit more quickly, so we're going to have to make sure we give this a nice drink once a week, or else we're going to start to get some brown leaves. So you can see here, here's a nice crispy one. Here's another little crispy one right here. So these will start to appear, particularly with inconsistent watering. So if you want to keep your plant looking as full as possible, I would recommend being as consistent as possible, but I just find it's inevitable. I'm going to lose a couple of them over time. Eventually it's going to look like a mess, but of course you can remedy that by propagating vines, planting them back in the base of the soil, but this plant just grows so quickly, it just gets ahead of me before I even notice, before I have a fun, leggy plant with a lot of character. Maybe too much character sometimes. Regardless, I think everyone should try out growing one of these once. Tradescantias have such an incredible vibe. It's like that weed growing out of a crack in the sidewalk, or like you found it on the side of a walking path in the woods and you just kind of like dug it up and put it in a pot. That's the vibe that Tradescantias give me. This one in particular just has the added benefit of it being fun and colorful with the white and the pink. Last but most certainly not least, we have arrived at white, which is once again going to represent the trans community, particularly people who are currently transitioning, people who have no gender, people who are gender nonconforming, and people who are intersexed. So I have to talk about the Syngonium podophyllum albovariegatum for my white plant today. This is like the it white plant, besides the variegated monstera, but I absolutely could not talk about the variegated monstera today because it's just been so overrated for the last couple of years. So this one, while not overrated, is just so much more worth your time. It's going to give you everything you want in a variegated monstera and more, like literally more. It's actually going to grow versus your variegated monstera is going to give you like 1 or 2 leaves a year max if you're lucky. These have also, very similarly to the Cebu Blue Pothos, have been becoming much more prevalent on the market, much easier to find. The price has dropped. I don't think it's as low as the Cebu Blue Pothos. I think any variegated plant seems to hold onto its price tag a little bit longer than its non-variegated counterparts. It's just the way the market works. I feel like whether it's actually worth it or not is beyond me, but I still really love this plant. The white splotches obviously carry it home. I'm a huge fan of the immature foliage, the triangular shape that you can see here. As this plant starts to mature, you can see this is an example of what it will start to do. We'll kind of get more of those lobes. I kind of prefer the way this plant looks immature more than it looks mature. To each their own when it comes to that. So if you want these leaves to be mature, you would allow it to grow up a moss pole. Like I have my Syngonium back here, even though the leaves are kind of yellow. Maybe I could have talked about this one for the yellow one today. But if you grow a Syngonium up a moss pole, it's going to encourage those leaves to grow larger. They're going to get lobes, and they're going to get even more lobes than just two. They might become like a star or like a hand. I don't know. This is my representation of what a Syngonium mature leaf would look like. As the moss pole is just kind of imitating a tree. So it's supposed to be like growing up a tree. That's how it grows in nature. But without that tree, it's left to scramble along the ground to search for a tree, which is essentially what this is doing, even though it's trailing. It's really what all trailing plants are doing, technically. So you can kind of see that with this growth pattern here, how it's wanting to like creep along the surface of the soil with the way that you can see the leaves are growing upright. I don't know. It's a vibe though when you kind of just leave it be. I think these have a very just like upright, aggressive, kind of masculine vibe in comparison to like the Cebu Blue Pothos, which had a much more relaxed, like feminine vibe, if you catch my drift. All just characteristics that all these different plants sport to give you all sorts of different reasons to love them. The only difference in care with this Syngonium really that I've noticed in comparison to many of the other arrowhead vine Syngoniums is that this one just requires a little bit more sunlight to hold up the fun variegation that the foliage sports. These leaves are very thin, so I wouldn't give it too much direct sunlight as I could probably burn very easily, but I'm growing mine like roughly 6 feet off of my east-facing windows, and I've been having some pretty good luck since I moved here. In fact, I really think it looks amazing. But I think that's going to do it for today's video, the pride flag and plants. There are way too many for me to do a recap. Of course, as always, I will leave all the plants I talked about in the description below if you are curious. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure today. Like I said, we should be celebrating Pride year-round, not just 1 month out of the year. And I think that could be said about most celebratory months that we have 1 month out of the year. So if you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Philly Foliage. If you'd like to support me monetarily, you can follow me on Patreon. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.